Great, welcome everybody to our professional development session on post-baccalaureate opportunities. We are going to focus primarily in this session on research opportunities that undergraduates can look forward to participating in after they graduate. And we know a lot of people want to participate in these as they prepare for graduate school or maybe even medical school. And so we may kind of focus on those longer term goals as well. We have 4 panelists here who are all right now doing post-baccalaureate research positions. And I have a list of questions for all of them that I'll be walking us through. But why don't we start out by having our panelists introduce themselves. And Marissa, you are the first one on my screen if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Marissa Newinch. I actually graduated from Miami in 2021, and I worked in Dr. Radke's lab from December 2018 to when I graduated in 2021. After that, I really wanted to follow the course of researching addiction, and so I went to just looking online for different research jobs, and eventually found myself in Memphis, Tennessee under Dr. Tunstall. And now we're looking at, I don't know how long to go about it. We're looking at drug and alcohol addiction using rat models. So Dr. Radke works with mice, and it was an interesting transition to go from mice to rats. And yeah, I'm excited to do this.
Great. And Marissa, do you have a sense of where you want to be next, or like, are you doing research in hopes of getting somewhere else, or it's okay if you're still undecided on that too?
Yeah, so I know when I left, I was feeling pretty undecided, and I'm still a little undecided on where I want to go. Getting into a research position has really, like a full-time research position, has really helped me decide that I don't really know what I want to do yet, but I know that I like the lens of focusing on addiction and neuroscience. So I'm trying to figure out how I can do that in a way that like is meaningful to me. And right here, I'm really enjoying it. Doing a lot of things that I did in your lab, in this lab too, like cryosectioning and everything. But working in your research lab before really helped me decide that I want to still pursue research and do something that I'm really interested in after I graduate, as like a gap year or 2. So right now I know where I'm leaning, but I'm too hesitant to say anything right now.
Yeah, thanks. I think a lot of students find themselves in that position of not quite knowing what they want to do, and that's one benefit of kind of taking a couple years to do research.
Yeah, that's why I thought instead of letting the hesitancy stop me from doing multiple things I like, I was like, let me chase the one thing that really interests me and I feel really passionate in. So that's how I came here.
Great. All right, Thomas, on my screen.
Hi, I'm Thomas Perry. I went to school in Colorado College, and I started working in Anna's lab this January. Well, actually, I started volunteering this past fall, and then Anna took me on as a research assistant this January. When I initially left school, I knew I wanted to do research. It was something I really wanted to experience. I didn't know my long-term goals, but I just wanted to experience research. And I spent a long time applying to research positions, had a lot of trouble with that. So I sort of changed my strategy to just emailing people whose research I found really cool. So I would pick a school and I'd look through all of their professors and I'd be like, okay, this is the lab I would want to be at here. And I'd email one professor per school. And yeah, a lot of people said like they would love to talk to me and then gave me great advice. Most of them said they didn't have money to hire people. And then I got lucky with Anna, and I've been really happy doing work here. We do work on alcohol addiction, as you probably know. Yeah. Am I missing anything?
That's great. Thank you. All right, Elise, you're next.
Just take off my mask. We're in a shared space here. So Yeah, my name is Elise. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No. Okay. Hi, my name is Elise. Elise Van Leer. I'm currently working as a postbaccalaureate research fellow at the NIH. I work with Maya. We're two peas in a pod. We pretty much work under the same person. We work with Dr. Andrew Holmes in the laboratory of behavioral and genomic neuroscience. So we do a lot of behavioral neuroscience, and specifically we're working on a project that uses mouse models of fear and anxiety. We're interested in the role of endocannabinoids in like PTSD and other anxiety disorders. So yeah, not so much alcohol, but we are kind of in this psychiatric mental health adjacent field. I went to McGill University. It's up in Canada, like very far from Miami, where you guys are, a little different climate. And I studied pharmacology and therapeutics there, but I was really interested in psychopharmacology. And so for most of my undergrad, I did work in addiction and substance abuse related labs. And my senior thesis was in nicotine withdrawal. So familiar with the field. And yeah, that's it. Let me know if you guys have any other questions. Me and Maya are both applying to medical school this upcoming cycle. So we can help you with questions if you have those, but we are still kind of in the throes of the application process. So we can't give you too much definite advice on that regard. So yeah, I'll hand it over to Maya.
Great. Thank you, Maya.
Hi, I'm Maya. Can everyone hear me?
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm Maya. I graduated from Vanderbilt in May of 2021. And when I was at Vanderbilt, I did a lot of research. I worked in 2 different labs. One of the labs was focusing on epilepsy research, trying to find the mechanisms underlying sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. And the other lab that I worked in was studying the role of a particular ion channel in major depressive disorder. So trying to find therapeutic targets for that. So in these 2 labs, I worked with MD PhDs, and they kind of inspired me to pursue that career path as a physician scientist, since I got to see a lot of translational work being done from basic science research to hopefully having an impact on patients. So because of that, I'm now applying to MD PhD programs. And I, like Elise, also am an NIH postbac. And I think Dr. Holmes was Anna's PI as well during postdoc. So that's how we got connected. Yeah, so if any questions relating to like MD PhD specific things or neuroscience research in general and applying to med school, we're happy to answer. So yeah, I have a lot of like different neuroscience experience, like very broadly, but I'm still not 100% sure on which area I want to do, either neurology, psychiatry, kind of up in the air. But having that breadth of experience, especially after coming to the Holmes Lab, has been really useful. So.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And thanks to all of our panelists for being here. I know we have a lot of different experience that you guys have in different places you're going. So I think you'll all have really important perspectives to share. I thought we'd just start out by talking about what are the different options that exist for doing research after you graduate. So maybe if Maya and Elise could kind of talk about, you're in like a program, right? Whereas Marissa and Thomas are doing more just like you apply to an individual lab. And so maybe you could talk about those types of things you're in, but also what else did you find when you were looking for opportunities post-graduation? What's out there that students will be finding when they look?
I'm happy to start. So the NIH program, I guess, is a program essentially, but it's kind of the same as like finding a lab. So I guess you submit your application to a centralized portal, and they require like recommendation letters, your transcript, CV, and cover letter. So kind of like submitting to a normal job, except a ton of different PIs have access to all your information through this NIH portal. And you can email PIs or they can reach out to you. Either direction works. And there's just so many opportunities at the NIH. So and of course, like a lot of different types of labs as well. So there's just plenty of places for people to potentially go. And I actually found out about the NIH program from one of my high school friends who's currently a postbac here as well. And she just recommended coming here because there's just so many stellar opportunities from, getting to, first of all, work on like funded research that's with almost like infinite funding because it is the NIH, as well as having a wealth of opportunities to go to conferences, and just getting counseling resources for applying to medical school, graduate school, things like that. There's just so much support here. And also because they know that you're planning to go on, really postdocs are only supposed to stay for 1 to 2 years at the NIH. So they give you also a lot of flexibility in, kind of knowing when you have to apply and like do interviews and things like that. Like our supervisor as well as PI are very understanding of that. So that's one of the big benefits in coming here, in my opinion. But yeah, I only applied to the NIH, but I also saw there are a lot of opportunities, even in my own undergrad, with people advertising for research assistants for gap years, as well as on Twitter. There's a lot of people who are asking for postdocs. So just, yeah, some of my experience there.
I have a question. Maya, are you in like the IRTA program, the IRTA program?
Yeah, we're in the postbac program. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll add to that also. I think for me, the support was a really big part of choosing to come here, and the way that they see this as a stepping stone. And really your mentors are so understanding of any time you need to take off, kind of any accommodations that need to be made in order for you to prepare for the next step. It really, in many cases, even takes priority over the research. So for instance, I took the MCAT in January and I studied for 6 months while working full time. And then I took 2 weeks off at the beginning of January, which was kind of an unusual situation. And since we get paid a stipend, it's not like it's taken off of your pay or anything like that. And of course, I gave my supervisor advance notice and she was extremely supportive of doing that as well. So that's something to consider, is if you are planning to go to med school or grad school, what kind of flexibility do you need post grad to do the testing, or make your application the best it can be, if you're interested in a postbac, and as opposed to like a master's or right into PhD or something like that.
So I work for UT, like University of Tennessee. They have their own health science center, which is why I'm in like Memphis and not Knoxville or anywhere else. And it's different in certain ways that it feels like, I guess, more like university corporate. Like you clock in, you work 9 to 5. I still come in on weekends and like check on rats and everything. But working in the new lab was really interesting to me because Dr. Tunstall had done his postdoc at NIH for several years and then came here with his own funding. So that's how when I reached out to him, he was like, we have 2 positions, actually 1 position available. And then he interviewed me and then he was like, you were the right person for it. So we're going to make it 2 positions available. But having them like utilize funding in different ways and learning about, what actually all goes into creating a lab. There's so much equipment and everything that you kind of don't think of when you're going into like such an established place. That was something that I didn't even think about when applying, but I was looking at a lot of different places. I wasn't really stuck on like staying in one area. I just wanted to go with someone who was really, really interesting and who could like be supportive and help for the future. So once you kind of email people and you get a feeling of what they're about, then it's kind of easier to decide if you want to like kind of go to university route or to go like the NIH route. I like applied to both, but sometimes like people reply a lot faster when they're like really needing to start up versus when it's like very, very, very established. But it can be a quick process. But if you find the right people who support you, then I think like it all works out in the end. I don't even know if that's helpful. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Marissa. And I remember you applied to a lot of different labs. And so,
Yeah,
you know,
it
there
was.
are a lot of PIs, especially like you said, younger PIs who are starting up labs that are
Mhm.
looking just to get somebody. And maybe can you talk about how you found some of those
Yeah,
opportunities?
I again graduated in May 2021 and was bartending at Brick during the nighttime and then just literally searching for jobs during the daytime. I looked at, Indeed a lot. I don't even have a Twitter account, but I was like trying to like search on Twitter how to find people. And that's actually how I found Dr. Tunstall. I found a lot of other labs through like you recommending them to me, Dr. McMurray recommending them to me, and also just looking online, literally like research technician, addiction, neuroscience. That was it. I really cast my net very wide. I got accepted to many labs, but some even offered like NSF fellowship, like postbac programs. And ultimately, I was like, something about this one just feels right to me. So that's why I picked it. But yeah, just Twitter is surprisingly like it's so easy to kind of just search what I search, very wide net, and then find a lot of like programs that you're interested in. After you do that, definitely check out their lab website, see if their Twitter and lab website are up to date. You don't want to email a PI and be like, "Hi, I saw your open position." They're like, "That was in 2018. We don't need someone anymore." So yeah, definitely. Another thing is like, don't be scared to reach out. Don't be scared to, throw your CV out there, because you never know what can happen. But definitely Indeed. There's another job one that starts with like a Z or something, and then Twitter. Those would be my top 3.
Yeah, I know I'm on Twitter and see positions all the time. So even if you have a professor in your institution who you think might be connected that way, go ahead and follow them or ask if they can send you positions they see. Or, you can follow me on Twitter. I retweet behavioral neuroscience ones, but if there's a certain area you're interested in, go follow those people. And a lot of times that'll help you get connected with those. I want to transition a little to what are some of the qualifications or credentials that somebody might need to get into the type of position that you are all doing. And Thomas, I know you sort of came in without having undergraduate research experience. I know Marissa had it. I'm not sure about Elise and Maya, so there's probably different answers to this, and it'd be great to hear from all of you on that point.
I mean, I can talk about my experience. It was weird. I like didn't have experience in a lab, but I loved neuroscience classes, and I did a thesis. And I think that if you are a senior and you're graduating, like the amount of experience you have, you're not going to be able to change that. If you're not a senior, you should try and work in a lab. That'll definitely benefit you. But you can advertise yourself instead as someone who's like super excited about work, and to just be cognizant that you might need to develop some skills. So with Anna, for example, I was lucky enough to be taken on as a volunteer at first, and that allowed me to just sort of learn everything I needed to know in the lab before being taken on as an actual research assistant. Yeah, does that answer a little bit?
Yeah, I can add on to that also. For at least the NIH system, as Maya kind of explained, there's like a central application system, and if you apply, you're asked to kind of submit a resume, but you also submit keywords like neuroscience, behavioral neuroscience, whatever, and that can be a really useful tool for people to be able to find you. So even if you don't necessarily have experience in a field that you're interested in, you can add those to keywords, and it just increases the chances that maybe one of those staff scientists or postdocs will be able to find you if they're looking for somebody. I think it does always help to have research experience. I know my supervisor saw my experience and it matched very closely with what she was looking for, but that's definitely not always the case. There's a lot of people that I've met as postbacks and even in our lab that don't necessarily have exact matching experience from undergrad to what we do now. So yeah, just try and make yourself as available as possible. If you do want to apply through NIH, of course, you can always reach out to PIs, which they love. Definitely do that. But when you're doing the application, make sure you kind of put in those keywords and make it easy for them to find you. That's a good tip, I think.
I think, yeah, adding on to that, I think, I know some people in our lab actually didn't have any experience. I think previous postbacks didn't have any experience before coming to the NIH and joining this lab. So I think part of it is, selling yourself in, showing that you're a diligent person, putting together a really nice cover letter that describes your interests, and people can see that you're really serious about, getting that experience if it was hard to get during undergrad. I know also, like, my former PI when I was at Vanderbilt, he had hired a research assistant doing gap year. She had never had any research experience, and she was able to explain why she wasn't able to get it. But she put together a very nice, cohesive application, and she was the best fit for it because he thought that she would be a very diligent person, very hardworking, willing to learn, and she was able to get that position because of that. So I would say, even if you don't have experience, it's important to, show some of the good qualities that you would expect someone trying to do science or just doing bench work to have. And yeah, I think having that, also having, potentially knowing professors who might have connections at NIH or some other school that you're interested in working at is also really useful, because I know having those connections can get you get your application noticed, for example, if you're applying to certain labs or certain positions. So, just kind of expanding your network in science is also pretty useful and can help you get those postdoc positions if you're interested.
Sorry, you can go, Thomas.
You should go first. I've already talked.
So when I applied to all the places, they knew that I had, about 3 years of experience. But the other research assistant that works in the same lab as me, he came in not having specifically neuroscience, research history. He published a paper for some other social psychology thing, but he was trying to think, he did a lot of statistics for the university that he worked at, and even though there wasn't any, it wouldn't appear there would be any parallels between organizing student history and organizing 1 million samples for rat brains or mouse brains or anything. Those skills do translate over to the jobs that you work at. So if you're just super organized, or I also organize a lot of students being a tour guide at Miami, they see those other organizational skills, and they really think this person could be a good fit. And if you say, I pick up things super fast, I mentored other students in other aspects of your schooling, they do see that and they do pick it up. Also, if you're not a senior, you could always do the BERT program at Miami, which is a full year of just doing research and getting that under your belt, in case you don't have the opportunity to get into a lab, but you really do want to do research. There is always that at Miami. But definitely list all the skills you have when you're doing it. So then again, they see those certain things. I had to cross-section so many brains, but the PI in my lab was okay, I really want someone to cross-section a lot of brains, because he has a lot of brains at NIAAA or NIH to get looked at. And he's we have to ship them here, and you have to just section them all, and then we got to just mount them and put them on slides and read them. He wanted someone who could just take their experience and then just translate it to a different machine and everything. But don't ever feel like you're not, just because you don't have experience doesn't mean that you have no chance to do whatever you want. Again, what Maya said, sell yourself, sell those other qualities. Thomas, with how he didn't have experience before, when they see someone just putting out that effort, they really want to reciprocate and help.
Thanks. This is all great advice. Thomas, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to like continue with what we're saying. I think being cognizant of what experience you have is important. And I said that before. And what I mean by that is like, there are certain strategies of getting jobs that might be really hard if you've never been in a lab. So I like Indeed specifically, I think that they have these like requirement sets that if you don't have those, if you don't meet a lot of those requirements, it might be really hard to get a job that way. But on the flip side, emailing people and like cold emailing people and networking, every time you do that, like you get somebody on your side who then might share a listserv with you or a job opportunity or might put in a good word for you. And I think that like to just be aware of how much experience you have, but regardless of how much you have, like there's still a way to get a job. If that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like don't feel like you're, kind of defeated.
Yeah, I think this is all good advice. That there are multiple ways you can show that you have the skills necessary. These panelists have talked about some of those. And some of that too is to get involved or think about how you've done research in the classroom, right? So you can apply that as well if you haven't specifically been in a lab. So Marissa mentioned that. So let's talk a little bit about why you all decided to take this, gap year or take this time where you're doing research. I know you're headed in different directions, so could you talk about how you think this time is benefiting you in your career and what, where it's leading you? And a related question, sorry, I want to put this in there too, is we have a question about, how do I know if I'm ready? Should I go straight to grad school or should I take this extra time? And so how did you think about that question? Why did you end up choosing to do what you're doing?
So I actually finished undergrad in 3 years and I wasn't ready to apply for MD PhD programs at that time. So I wanted to take a gap year and apply during that period. But after coming to the NIH, because there's just so much to learn, we're doing a lot of like advanced techniques and things, I didn't think that 1 year would be sufficient. And also hearing from former postbacks, they said, you really need that 2 years. Your first year, you're going to be doing like that full-time research. The second year, you're going to be maybe more distracted with applications and things like that. So I ended up deciding to do that 2-year period. So in my opinion, it turned out really well because originally I was just going to do it as like, a filler for, having that period to apply. But instead, it turned out to be like one of the most like fulfilling research experiences I've had, being able to work on like very like high impact, like really cool, very novel research, and getting to do techniques that were completely different from what I've done before. So that's why I ended up choosing to do 2 years. And in terms of deciding like whether or not you're ready to go to grad school, med school, or whatever route you end up choosing, I think it's ultimately, if you ask yourself, like, do I feel like I'm ready to apply? Do I feel like, I'm like the best, do I want to like present myself to, admissions committees in the way, where your application is at? If you feel like your answer is yes, then you should go for it. But in my case, I wasn't 100% ready because also with COVID, a lot of opportunities were gone because of, especially for applying to med school. So I felt like having that extra year was really important for me. And now, like after finishing that full year, I've just seen how much I've grown, not just as a researcher, potential physician, but also just as a person, like maturing, living on my own, like cooking for myself, planning things, paying bills. Like it's pretty crazy how much I've grown over the last just, like 11 months alone. So to me, it feels like it was very well worth it. And even doing like an extra year from what I originally had planned, I feel like it's been really rewarding. So I think there is sometimes like a rush from people to, just jump straight into grad school or medical school because, all these things take a lot of time. But I think there's like an important aspect to realize like you should, only go whenever you're fully ready because it's your own journey. Everyone gets to, where they're supposed to be in different ways. And if it means, getting more exposure to research or even just doing additional like clinical opportunities, for example, if you want to go to medical school, do what you feel like will let you and your application shine the most. And if it means taking more time, like that's totally fine and kind of accepted by most grad schools and medical schools too. So.
I had the same reasoning of taking time off. Is I needed to make my application for grad school stronger. I also wanted to make sure that I was going to go into the right research field. Like I could be working with people or working with animals, and I wanted to make sure that I knew what I was getting myself into. I think grad school, like if you're going for a PhD, is a really big commitment. You know, it can be 5 years, it could be 7 years. I've heard of it being longer, you know, so you want to make sure that that's really something you want to do and that you're going into a program that you really want to do. So I mean, that's really why I wanted to get more experience, is also to decide whether animal research and neuro was the path that was good for me.
I went into thinking about the gap years like like Maya said, I was like, I don't feel like I'm ready. So in like that respect that you said it, you don't feel like you're ready. You want to take more time to like learn more about things and kind of grow as a person. It's really hard to like not compare yourself to your peers and what other people are going and doing. But ultimately, like you have to put your needs and your passions first when thinking about like your future in the long haul. I feel like I did like have the experience through Dr. Adke's lab, but I also felt like I didn't have that strong of like getting published, getting on papers. I was like mentioned in 2 or 3 papers, but my name was only on 1 paper. So I was like, okay, I want to get on more papers, and we're working on a paper right now. But I felt like that would really help my application process in the future for whatever I want to go to, like being published, getting my name on things. That's kind of what people think about sometimes, is like how many papers have I been on, how many like studies have I contributed to. And that's also a big part of any interview process, is like, okay, what have you done? What do you actually like know about what you've done? You know, neuropeptides, surgeries, things like that, for any like application process. So I really was like, okay, now I want to take what I've learned and get on like more papers, get my name out there, so then I can kind of feel more confident in my application and the whole process. But I signed for a 2-year contract, so I couldn't really decide how long I wanted to stay. I was just like, oh, okay, I'll just be here until, you know, August 2023, and then have to figure it out between the time I moved here and the time I leave. So sometimes you can't exactly like choose how long you get to stay, like 1 or 2 years. And I don't know which one I would have preferred. I'm almost at 1 year now, and I think the second year will be very interesting. I mean, we have 2 vapor chambers that can fit, you know, 100 and something like rats and 48 operant boxes. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to be going on, that has been going on, that I feel like if I left now, I wouldn't be able to really get into it.
Oh, one thing I wanted to add about papers, like I kind of had that same mentality where it's like, oh, I want to like be on papers and be able to show what I've done. But it's also important to realize that a ton of people have gotten into, you know, great medical schools and research program, PhD program, without ever having been published. I think what matters the most is being able to explain, you know, what research you did, like why the research is important and what you contributed to it. And even if that's not shown with like a name on a paper, for example, you'll still be able to see that through your application materials, that you've contributed a lot and you know what you're doing and that you're ready for this career path.
Yeah, exactly. I just felt like I was like lacking in that aspect. I now realize that it's not all about like the names and the papers and everything, but if you're feeling insecure about one aspect, you kind of focus on it. So I was like, I really want it. I honestly, like coming into a new lab, I don't know how many papers I'll get out of it, but I don't even, it's not like a priority.
Yes, this is a great conversation. I think we're seeing the goalposts for getting into grad school are shifting a little, and there's a lot of anxiety among undergraduate students, I think, about, do I need to be on a paper? And I think for some programs, at least what I've heard from my colleagues is, yeah, you do. But there are a lot of programs where you don't. And so I think this question about should I take extra time to get on papers is an important one, and it partly depends on where you want to go. And it's just one factor of many. These other points about, do I need to decide what field I want to go into, right? Or do I need to grow up a little more? Or, am I missing something else in my application, right? Those are also gonna really factor in. And if the only thing you're missing is a paper, then I would say maybe still go out there and apply. I also like the point about how, people can take very different paths, and you should do the thing that makes sense for kind of your journey and where you've been and what you've done so far. And I always think about that with my colleagues and seeing the different paths we've taken. I had a colleague when I was a postdoc who we would always compare our stories, because he had, not gotten into research until a lot later, and he'd done a lot of other things and traveled around. And I was a person who, I also graduated in 3 years. I went right into my PhD. Like, I always knew that's what I wanted to do. And we both ended up in the same place, and we have similar jobs now and both love those. So, like, there are different ways to get there, and you have to figure out what works for you. But so if you are, thinking about this question, I also point out it's okay to also apply, and then if it doesn't work out, go do a research position or something like that. So did any of you use this kind of time to help you decide where you were going, like maybe between medical school and graduate school? Or you all sort of already knew, and that's okay. I just was wondering if we had anybody who.
No, I'm still undecided where I'm going, but I think about it like constantly, specifically like animal research, whether that's something I want to do, or academia as a route. Like, if that's something I want to do, it's not something I've like made a decision about, but I wouldn't have been able to make an informed decision last year, like, because I had never worked with animals, and I now know like small things that might contribute to my decision, like a certain smell, or like, I don't know how much time commitment it ends up being. You learn a lot about what a workplace actually feels like. And I think that that's actually been one of my biggest realizations, is if you're interested in neuroscience, that's really cool and you should do a job in neuroscience, but that doesn't mean that you're always going to be doing what you've done in the classroom. It's very different. So to experience that has been very informative.
Yeah, so this is a big reason to maybe pursue some of this type of work, is just to figure out where exactly you want to go, whether it's the type of field you want to be in. Or I've worked with students who were doing these kinds of programs to decide between medical school and PhD. And I had one student I'm thinking of in particular, all through her postbac at NIH, who was really on the fence about that and spent 2 years kind of going back and forth. She ended up enrolling in MD PhD because she couldn't decide, right? But it's definitely the kind of program that can help you make that type of decision. Let's see. So Elise and Maya, you two are applying for medical school this year. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for neuroscience students applying to medical school? Do you think neuroscience is a useful kind of field to be in for that whole process?
I think neuroscience, well, for me, I majored in neuroscience, and I chose to do more research in it because that's the field that's really, driven my passion, and I'm just very interested in it. I'm still not 100% sure, what particular research path I'm going to go down, but definitely in neuroscience for sure. I would say my undergrad classes, I guess in neuroscience, I obviously had a lot of pre-med requirements, and those classes were great, helping to prepare for MCAT and things like that. And I think even going into medical school, I know that there's an entire neurology block, neuroscience block. So I'm sure that all of my neuroscience background will be really useful there. I think it's like a great major that exposes you to a lot of general biology, but at the same time also being able to focus on one specific area that you're interested in. So honestly, I personally feel like it doesn't matter what you major in undergrad, what you study, as long as you're interested in it, that's really important. And for me, that was neuroscience, which is why I chose it. So
great. We have sort of some general questions here too. One of them I thought was interesting was, do you have a specific undergraduate experience that you think has helped you most in your current endeavor? So I'm wondering if you all might reflect on that. Is there something you did as an undergraduate that you would recommend to other students that you just, think has been really helpful either in getting where you are now or just where you think you're going?
I can mention this. So I actually did a summer research internship at NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse, after my first year of college. So it was just like, I think 3 months, and I had no research experience at all, zero. I don't know why they took me, but they really try to get people just into research that way. And that's how I learned about the postbac program. And I just was able to see how passionate the people were around me. My postbac was very cool. She was like my idol, and is basically the reason I decided to apply to the program. But if you're still kind of earlier year of university, it's something worth looking into, because it's kind of like a little taste of the URTA program. You could be around postbacs in a very rigorous research setting and kind of decide if maybe that's something you would want to do as a postbac, or maybe you're in a field and you're like, okay, this is totally not for me. If you didn't want to make that commitment to a postbac, something you could consider earlier on. It's called the summer intern program with NIH, and it's only over the summer. So, and actually I know people that were hired multiple summers after that, and worked intermittently throughout the year doing that as well. So it's a good way to kind of get your network started as well.
I think one thing from undergrad would be having certain professors that you have a good connection with, or certain like bosses or anything, be there for your reference letters, for recommending you as a good worker, a good person, someone who is a good working in as a good teammate essentially. So definitely having those 3 references from your undergrad experience would be very beneficial for either your job hunt or for future applications, because they can come back and ask you to be on a panel or anything like that. So having that connection and that mentorship is really beneficial in the long run. Also, for the last question, I think coming in on a new lab really opened my eyes to all the work and effort that it actually is after you've done your bachelor's, you've gotten your PhD, you've done your postdoc. After that, the whole actually starting up and getting momentum really opened my eyes to all the extreme effort that you got to go through to get up and running essentially. So that also has helped me kind of decide, do I see myself doing that in the future? Do I see myself going a different way? Again, like Thomas and I go back and forth a lot, but it definitely has been kind of a blessing to see just something start up from the ground up.
I definitely agree that relationships with professors are super, super important. That's one of the biggest things that I took away from college too. I'm probably going to be lifelong, friends / mentor-mentee relationship with one of my PIs from undergrad. We still talk a ton, and if he's sometimes he knows I want to go into academia, so he's like, oh, would you like to take a look at this grant? Or he's very much included me in writing up manuscripts and things like that, and giving me a lot of opportunities. And that just come from being able to build a really strong mentorship opportunity with him. And he also ultimately inspired me to do an MD PhD as well. So finding mentors that are kind of doing things that you're interested in, and who will also be able to help you find those connections and help you with the next path forward. I think those are really, really meaningful relationships that you'll never regret having, and they'll always be in your corner to write you a recommendation letter anytime. He's very excited. He's like, when am I going to submit this track? When is this due? He's so excited always to write me recommendations and things like that. So
I just agree with everyone. Relationships. I also think that just like any amount of excitement I had about a specific topic was always helpful. So if you write a big paper in a class, like make sure you really engage with that content and pick something that you really like, because that might make you look really good in interview setting because you have something to sort of nerd out about. Yeah, and then also just like general work experience has been has been helpful now that I have my job. Like I really am grateful about any job I've had in the past. It has helped me just be professional and keep organized, like whatever job it was. Yeah.
I love to hear you guys highlighting the importance of these professional relationships and having mentors. I think it's really scary for people though, especially at the undergraduate level. That might be the first time you really have to do that, right? Is to get to know somebody who's in this kind of intimidating position. And I can remember as an undergraduate, it wasn't something I was good at, getting to know my professors. And I can definitely tell you now, having still survived and made it here, that some people who I think are really successful are people who are really good at that. And so I wonder, do you have advice for how do you connect with people and get these mentors who might be your letter writers or provide you access to opportunities? Because I think it's probably scary and intimidating for a lot of people. So did you feel that way? And do you have any advice on how they should go about it?
Yeah, I think it can be really scary. I think at the beginning of college, I was a little bit intimidated, but for me, I guess I formed a lot of really good mentorship relationships in the lab and also with professors in general. And I guess with professors, just going to office hours, talking to them. I have this professor who focuses, she basically started like a nonprofit for neurodevelopmental disorders because her son actually has a neurodevelopmental disorder, and she invited all of us to come work with her and like help her and things like that. So I was able to like form a really strong relationship through that, just working on like side projects with her, things like that. Because she really loves students and like mentorship and things like that. So just talking to her during office hours, getting to know her, things like that was useful. And in terms of in the lab specifically, for me, the way I formed a lot of my relationships was just going into the lab and talking to the PI if they weren't really busy. I was lucky in that the labs I was working in were a little bit smaller since they were just getting started. So the mentors that I had, we talked all the time. If I ever had a question or something I was curious about, or even just like a research idea, I would go into the lab, talk to them, and we had a lot of really great discussions through those, just like sitting down and talking to them. And yeah, I think from there, I became even more so like friends with a lot of these mentors. And like I said, they're going to be like my lifelong mentors, friends. And yeah, just naturally those relationships will evolve as you become closer and, kind of open up and talk about things you guys enjoy together. So science being being what you enjoy. So.
Just quickly, I think one way I develop those relationships is everybody here has like so many questions about this process. Your professors are really good people to ask, or people that in graduate school. Professional people are really great people to ask, and every time you ask a question like that person feels like they suddenly like are rooting for you, right? It's like, okay, well, I hope they do get a job, and then you ask them for a recommendation, and they'll be more inclined to do it. So ask them about their career, how they got where they got. Yeah, just ask questions. That's a great way to develop a relationship.
Yeah, I would add on to that. I mean, I went to a really big school, and up until my third year, my classes were 400, 500 people. So yes, talking to professors was extremely intimidating. And I think you do sometimes just have to put yourself out there a little bit. But like Thomas was saying earlier, like show your passion, be excited, find something you're really, really excited about. And sometimes that's what you got. And that really speaks volumes. I mean, there's nobody in research that doesn't want to talk to you about their research. That's just how it goes. That's exactly what they want to do. You ask questions, if you're excited about it, that's going to really show. And honestly, that would be like my piece of advice, and I think everybody on this panel's advice, is just show your enthusiasm, show your passion, be yourself, and ask questions, and you're gonna be fine.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. We are at about 12:35, which is when this is scheduled to wrap up. I think we heard some really great advice today about how to get involved in undergraduate or post-baccalaureate research and why you would do it. I am just really thankful to Maya and Elise and Marissa and Thomas for sharing their experiences. And I wish you all the best of luck too. And one of the great things about doing this is now we all know each other as well. So that importance of relationships and connections. So good luck to everybody, and thanks for being a part of this.